Okay, so we will continue to discuss about substrate level phosphorylation, oxidative phosphorylation, and explain step in glycolysis, pyruvate oxidation, Krebs cycle, electron transport chain, and enzyme involved. Okay, sebelum tu Madam nak tunjuk, this is the formula for cellular respiration. Right? During cellular respiration, okay, please salin this formula. Okay, during cellular respiration, you can see one glucose molecule, okay, will be burned, akan dibakar dengan 6 molekul oxygen, alright, and the process release energy, which is exergonic reaction, and producing 6 carbon dioxide and 6 molecule of water. Maksudnya satu glukos yang kita ambil, karbohidrat ke glukos ke, akan dibakar dengan kehadiran 6 molekul of oxygen, and from there it will be converted into 6 molecule of carbon dioxide. Okay, and then 6 molecule of carbon dioxide and 6 molecule of water. Okay, alright. So now let's see throughout this process, melalui apa yang kita akan belajar nanti, glycolysis, the pyruvate oxidation, Krebs cycle and whatnot yang ada kat sini, you will see macam mana daripada satu glukos kita akan dapat 6 molekul carbon dioxide. Okay, kita akan belajar macam mana kita boleh dapat apa yang ada dalam rumus ni. Okay, right. Okay, so aerobic respiration. What does it mean by aerobic respiration? Aerobic respiration ialah proses respiration, pembakaran makanan. Alright. Aerobic means in the presence of oxygen. Proses pembakaran ataupun pembakaran makanan ataupun selular respirasi, respirasi sel, right? Macam mana sel kita guna oxygen untuk orang kata apa, break down sugar and to produce carbon dioxide. Okay, so this process of aerobic respiration divided into 4 stages: glycolysis, pyruvate oxidation, citric acid cycle or Krebs cycle, and oxidative phosphorylation. So dalam video ni, kita akan ajar glycolysis. Okay. Alright, so this is the overview of cellular respiration. Okay, sekarang ni you kena bayangkan, this is a very big cell. This is your cell. Animal cell, for example. Okay, so inside the cell, remember we have so many organelles, okay, ada nucleus dan sebagainya, and one of it is mitochondria. And here yang dekat kawasan warna kuning ni ialah cytosol. Okay, yang warna orange ni, and here is the mitochondria. Okay, alright. So the first process yang kita akan belajar ialah glycolysis. So glycolysis happen inside cytosol. Dia berlaku di dalam cytosol. Okay, kalau tak faham juga, Madam lukis. Okay, let's say this is your cell. Bayangkan sel pipi ke apa ke lah. Okay, so this is nucleus. This is our DNA. And we have mitochondria. Okay, so glycolysis happen here in the cytosol. Okay, so what happened during glycolysis? During glycolysis, glucose ada berapa carbon? 6 carbon. Glucose will be breakdown, akan dipecahkan kepada pyruvate. How many pyruvate? 2 molecules of pyruvate. Di mana setiap satu pyruvate ada 3 carbon. Kita ada 2 pyruvate, 1 pyruvate 3 carbon. So maknanya, so kita akan dapat berapa molekul pyruvate? 2. Sebab 3 kali 2 sama dengan 6. So dia balik kepada 6 carbon. Okay. So that is the purpose of glycolysis. Pecahkan glucose kepada 2 molecules of pyruvate. And the process happen inside cytosol. Okay. And during the process, we are going to produce a little bit amount of ATP via process of substrate level phosphorylation. Okay, apa maksud substrate level phosphorylation? Okay, nanti Medan akan terangkan. Which is, secara asasnya ialah phosphate group dihantarkan kepada satu molekul, alright, And then, phosphate group daripada satu molekul dihantarkan kepada ADP, so akan membentuk ATP. Okay, so nanti kita discuss yang tu. Okay, during this process as well, electron also will be produced and carried via in the form of NADH. Okay, so tu nanti kita tengok. Sekarang ni bila nak you all faham, glycolysis is step pertama. It happen inside cytosol and the purpose is to break down glucose into 2 molecules of pyruvate. Okay, right. Okay, lepas habis glycolysis, right? Next process will be pyruvate oxidation and then later on citric acid cycle. But I'm not going to touch this one first. Okay, Meda akan nak fokus glycolysis sahaja dulu, okay? So I will skip this first. Okay, now let's see what is meant by substrate level phosphorylation. Okay, so this is the concept of substrate level phosphorylation. Okay, so this is enzyme. Remember, some protein act as enzyme, right? So look at here, this substrate has phosphate attached to it. So phosphate yang ada pada substrate ni will be transferred to ADP. So kita dah belajar, bila ADP campur dengan fosfat, dia akan jadi ATP. Alright, so you can see this phosphate is transferred to ADP and you can see it form ATP. And what happened to this substrate? The substrate convert into another product. So the formation of ATP through this kind of process, kita panggil sebagai substrate level phosphorylation. Ingat, phosphorylation maksudnya apa? Phosphorylation maksudnya penambahan fosfat kepada sesuatu molekul ataupun substrate. Okay, so substrate ataupun molekul yang menerima fosfat kita panggil sebagai phosphorylated. So ini adalah proses substrate level phosphorylation where we produce ATP. Kita menghasilkan ATP, right, by the transfer of phosphate to ADP from one substrate to ADP. Faham? Substrate phosphate daripada phosphate daripada substrate ni kita hantar kepada molekul lain, iaitu molekulnya adalah ADP, so that it can form ATP. So that is substrate level phosphorylation. Okay. Okay, now let's go to glycolysis. Okay, remember glycolysis happen in cytosol. Okay, cytosol. Okay, now the purpose is tadi untuk pecahkan molekul glucose. We want to break the glucose molecule into 2 molecules of pyruvate. Okay, alright. So glycolysis process divided into 2. Ada 2 fasa. The first one is energy investment phase. Investment maknanya pelaburan. Pelaburan maksudnya kita keluarkan modal. Apa yang kita keluarkan modal? Kita keluarkan modal apa? Kita gunakan modal ATP. We invest ATP. So in other words, ATP is used. Okay. How much ATP that is used during this energy investment phase? 2 ATPs. Right? And the second phase is energy payoff. Payoff mean kita dapat keuntungan semula. Okay, payoff. Maksudnya apa? We produce or form ATP. Okay, berapa banyak ATP akan dihasilkan nanti? 4. So you just you can see here during energy payoff phase kita akan dapat 4 ATP. We will also produce 2 pyruvates and we also will produce 2 molecules of NADH. Okay, right. So net tindak balas bersih. Tindak balas bersih maksudnya apa? Maksudnya kita dah tadi hasilkan 4 ATP. Asal usul tadi kita modalkan, kita laburkan 2 ATP. So berapa bersih yang kita dapat? So kita dapat 2 ATP net bersih. Okay, kita dapat RM4, modal kita RM2. So untung sebenar kita berapa? RM2. So similarly to this one. So 4 ATP form minus 2 ATP used. So net ATP that we'll get is 2 ATP. Right? And during this process, we are going to have 2 molecules of pyruvate, and we also will get 2 molecules of NADH. Daripada mana? This one. Ni, ingat ni, coenzyme. NAD plus bind with electron and hydrogen. So dia akan jadi NADH. Okay, so now let's go to the detail. Okay, glycolysis means sugar splitting, split, pecahkan, right? So glucose, which is 6 carbon, will be split into 3 carbon sugar. 3 carbon sugar. Maksudnya apa? 2 ketul gula yang mempunyai 3 carbon. Okay, 3 carbon sugar. So maksudnya satu ada 3 carbon, satu gula lagi pun 3 carbon. So this is 2. So 3 carbon sugar. Ada 2 molekul gula yang setiap satunya mempunyai 3 carbon. Okay, right. So bila 3 tambah 3 dia akan balik-balik kepada 6. Okay, right. So sugar will be oxidized. Sugar akan dibakar, akan dipecahkan, will be oxidized, and the remaining atom will be rearranged into 2 molecules of pyruvate. So remember, pyruvate tadi setiap satunya ada 3 carbon. So how many molecules? 2 molecules of pyruvate. Okay, and during glycolysis, it is divided into 2 phases. Energy investment phase, which the cell invests ATP, right, to provide activation energy untuk menyediakan tenaga permulaan in order by phosphorylating glucose. Phosphorylating maksudnya apa tadi? By adding phosphate to glucose. Maksudnya kita guna ATP, so kita akan dapat phosphate. Phosphate tu nanti kita akan tambah kepada glucose. Invest ATP. Ingat, bila invest ATP means ATP digunakan. So meaning ATP is breakdown into ADP plus phosphate. Okay, so phosphate ni will be used to phosphorylate glucose. Kita akan tambahkan phosphate ni kepada glucose later on. Okay, and this process of energy investment requires 2 ATP for every 1 molecule of glucose. Okay, right. So that is energy investment. Okay, in energy payoff, right? So energy payoff, ATP will be produced. Kita akan hasilkan ATP via substrate level phosphorylation. Ingat tadi apa substrate level phosphorylation? Kita ambil phosphate daripada satu substrate lain, kita tambahkan phosphate tu kepada ADP. Alright, so ADP plus phosphate, so maka jadilah dia ATP. So this ATP produced via substrate level phosphorylation. Okay, at the same time, this NAD plus coenzyme, okay, will be reduced. Reduce. Bila kata reduce tu maksudnya apa? Dia menerima elektron dan dia juga menerima hydrogen ion. Okay, NAD plus is reduced to NADH by electron that is released during oxidation of glucose. Okay, so net yield, hasil bersih glycolysis yang kita akan dapat ialah 2 ATP. Kenapa 2 tadi? Ingat tak kita kita dapat 4 ATP form minus 2 ATP that is invest. So kita akan dapat net of 2 ATP. So bersih yang kita dapat 2 lah. Okay, so 2 ATP and also 2 NADH. During this glycolysis, no carbon dioxide will be produced. And glycolysis boleh terjadi either in the presence or in the absence of oxygen. Ada oksigen ke, tak ada oksigen ke, glycolysis boleh berlaku. Okay, right. Okay, now I want you to refer to textbook. You have this picture in textbook. So please refer to textbook, page 170 if I'm not mistaken. So kena hafal. Okay, kena hafal this glycolysis process. Right? Okay, so we are going to start with energy investment phase. Ada 5 step sahaja. Okay, 5 step sahaja in energy investment. Okay, it start with glucose. So remember, glucose has 6 carbon. Ni carbon nombor 1, carbon 2, carbon 3, carbon 4, carbon 5, carbon 6. Okay, so nampak tak sini? An enzyme known as hexokinase transfer a phosphate group from ATP. Maknanya apa? Kita guna ATP. Use ATP. So ATP akan dipecahkan. So jadilah dia ADP plus phosphate. Okay, so this enzyme transfer phosphate group ni kepada glucose. So hexokinase transfer a phosphate group to glucose and it become glucose 6-phosphate. So nama produk yang kedua hasil daripada transfer of phosphate tadi ialah glucose 6-phosphate. Kenapa nama dia 6-phosphate? Now look at this phosphate. This phosphate is attached to carbon number 6. Sebab tu nama dia glucose 6-phosphate. Alright? Okay. Settle. Step number 1. Okay, now step number 2. Glucose 6-phosphate is converted into fructose 6-phosphate. So, rearrangement. Berlaku perubahan molekul. Dia masih lagi 6 carbon. Masih lagi 6 carbon. So, glucose 6-phosphate ditukarkan kepada its isomer. Molecular formula sama, struktur berbeza. So, glucose 6-phosphate is converted to its isomer known as fructose 6-phosphate. So, you can see the phosphate is still attached to carbon number 6. Dan kita masih lagi ada 6 carbon, sini pun 6 carbon. Settle step number 2. Madam, kena hafal apa, madam? Hafal benda-benda penting yang berlaku dekat setiap step ni. Madam, all the enzyme kena hafal ke, madam? Tak berapa penting sangat. Yang mana madam kata kena hafal, you hafal lah. Ya? Yeah? Okay. So, nampak tak enzyme kat sini is isomerase enzyme. Sebab tu tugas dia adalah untuk mengubah one molecule to another molecule. Okay? Right. So now we are having fructose 6-phosphate. Okay, next. What will happen to fructose 6-phosphate? Enzyme known as phosphofructokinase. Okay, don't worry. Jangan hafal. Tak payah hafal pun tak apa. So an enzyme transfer a phosphate group. You can see we use another ATP. Okay, this enzyme transfer a phosphate group from ATP to the opposite end of fructose 6-phosphate. And then producing fructose 1,6-bisphosphate. Okay, maknanya another molecule of ATP is used. So kita dapat ADP plus phosphate. Alright, so this phosphate will be transferred to the other end of the molecule. Maksudnya tadi fructose duduk kat carbon number 6. Now you can see this phosphate will be transferred to carbon number 1, carbon 1, carbon 2, carbon 3, carbon 4, carbon 5, carbon number 6. Since that, nama dia akan tukar daripada daripada fructose 6-phosphate kepada fructose 1,6-bisphosphate. Fructose 1,6-bisphosphate. Why? Because the phosphate is attached to carbon number 1 and to carbon number 6. So, sini satu. Sini satu. Okay? Alright. Okay, next. An enzyme known as aldolase. Okay. Enzyme aldolase cleave. Cleave ni maksudnya apa? Cut. Potong. Okay, remember we are still having 6 carbon. Tadi fructose 1,6-bisphosphate. Aldolase cleave sugar into 2 different 3 carbon sugar. Maknanya apa? Dia pecahkan kepada 2 molekul and setiap molekul ni ada 3 carbon. Okay, namanya apa? Satu, glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate, ada 3 carbon. And lagi satu, dihydroxyacetone phosphate or DHAP. Madam, boleh ke saya tulis dalam exam G3P? Boleh. Okay, boleh. Make sure huruf besar. G, glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. Kenapa 3-phosphate? Sebab you can see this phosphate is attached to carbon number 3. Okay, and second one is DHAP. Also 3 carbon. So dia pecahkan daripada 6 carbon, dia pecah 1 3 carbon, 1 3 carbon. Okay, so one is glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate and one is dihydroxyacetone phosphate. Okay, all right. But, okay, there is a but over here. Okay, DHAP ni is unstable. Dia tak stabil. So what happened? DHAP will convert, you can see dia tukar jadi, will convert into glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. Okay, so maksudnya sekarang ni apa? You ada 2 molecules of G3P. So satu G3P, 3 carbon, another G3P also 3 carbon. So 3 carbon, 3 carbon. Okay, all right. So now you have, remember, from fructose 1,6-bisphosphate, 6 carbon, it is divided into 2 molecule of 3 carbon sugar. 2 molecule 3 carbon sugar, iaitu glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate and also DHAP. But this DHAP is unstable. It will be converted into G3P. So kesimpulan dia, you will have 2 molecules of G3P, which each G3P has 3 carbon. Okay, so itu adalah energy investment phase. So daripada step 1 sampai step nombor 5 ni is energy investment phase. Okay, how much ATP that we have used in this energy investment phase? 1, 2. Okay, madam kena hafal macam mana ni madam? Okay, antara benda yang penting you kena hafal ialah you kena ingat dekat mana ATP digunakan. Okay, you kena ingat. Okay, 1 ATP digunakan antara glukos nak jadi glucose 6-phosphate. Okay, 1. Lagi 1 ATP digunakan masa bila fructose 6-phosphate nak jadi fructose 1,6-bisphosphate. Itu antara benda penting yang you kena ingat. Lepas tu fructose 1,6-bisphosphate will be cleaved into 2 molecule of 3 carbon sugar. Okay, so that is energy investment phase. Alright, okay, moving on. Okay, now let's see what happened during energy payoff. Kita dah masuk fasa yang kedua, energy payoff. Okay, so during energy payoff, ingat kita ada tadi 2 molekul G3P. Remember, setiap G3P ada 3 carbon. Okay, so what happened? The next step, the first step in energy payoff is first 2 sequential reaction. Ada 2 tindak balas yang berlaku dekat step yang ke-6 ni. The first one is G3P will be oxidized. Maksudnya G3P molekul tu akan kehilangan elektron. Okay, dia akan kehilangan elektron. So G3P is oxidized. So Mida akan tulis kat sini. Perkara yang berlaku yang pertama ialah G3P is oxidized. Okay, oxidized masuk kat sini. Ingat, salah satunya ialah dia hilang elektron. Okay, right. So apabila sesuatu molekul is oxidized, akan ada satu molekul lain yang akan menerima elektron. So that we call as reduce. Okay, so G3P is oxidized by transfer of electron to NAD+ to form NADH. So in other words, when G3P is oxidized, NAD+ is reduced to NADH. Maksudnya NAD+ akan menerima elektron dan juga akan menerima hidrogen ion, maka dia akan jadi NADH. So in other words, sekarang ni NADH adalah dalam bentuk membawa elektron. Okay, right. Okay, so next, using this, using energy from this hexagonic reaction, a phosphate group is attached to the oxidized substrate. So you can see phosphate group pun masuk. Benda yang ketiga berlaku ialah phosphate group added or attached to the substrate. Phosphate group akan masuk dan attach kepada substrate. Maka produk kita ialah 1,3-bis phosphoglycerate. Bis here means dia ada dua phosphate. One is attached to carbon number 1. This is carbon 1, carbon 2, carbon 3. Right? And one is attached to carbon number 3. So 1,3-bis phosphoglycerate. Okay. Berapa molekul 1,3-bis phosphoglycerate yang kita ada sekarang ni? Jawapan dia ialah 2. Kita ada 2 ketul 1,3-bis phosphoglycerate where each of them has 3 carbon. Madam, kenapa 2? Remember, we have 2 molecule of G3P. So, setiap satu G3P akan melalui proses ini. Okay, right? So, G3P is oxidized and NAD+ is reduced to NADH and phosphate group is added to the substrate. So, terbentuklah 1,3-bis phosphoglycerate. Madam, berapa molekul NADH yang kita dapat? Kita akan dapat dekat sini. As you can see from here, we got 2 NADH. Madam, kenapa 2 NADH? Remember, kita ada 2 G3P. Setiap G3P, dia akan menerima, elektron dia akan dihilang dan dia akan terima oleh NAD+. So kat sini kita dapat 2 NADH. Okay, alright. Next one. What happened to the 1,3-bis phosphoglycerate? The phosphate group is transferred to ADP via, okay, ini sangat penting, melalui substrate level phosphorylation. Okay, maksudnya apa? Phosphate group yang ada pada 1,3-bis phosphoglycerate tadi dihantar kepada ADP untuk membentuk ATP. So inilah proses substrate level phosphorylation, iaitu pembentukan ATP daripada transfer of phosphate kepada sesuatu molekul lain, iaitu ADP. In this case, ADP to form ATP. So tengok ni. Now the product is 3-phosphoglycerate. Maknanya phosphate carbon mana yang hilang? Yang carbon number 1 ke yang carbon number 3? Yang carbon number 1. So ni, phosphate yang carbon number 1 ni will be transferred to ADP to form ATP. So yang kita tinggal sekarang, nampak tak? Ni carbon number 3, yang ni carbon number 3. So yang masih tinggal ialah phosphate yang ada pada carbon number 3. That's why nama dia jadi 3-phosphoglycerate. Okay. So how many ATP that we will produce here? 2 ATPs. Kenapa 2 ATP? Sebab, remember, you ada 2 molekul 1,3-bis phosphoglycerate, which setiap satu akan hantar fosfatenya kepada ADP. Okay?